it's actually not
Hello? Hello? Now? That worked. Did that work? Then maybe I must. Let me just leave this. Hello everybody, thank you for attending tonight. little bit sad about the poor turnout. It's quite an important thing we get through quickly. But it's really important that it had to happen now. Student fees committees meeting soon, and we will all go on holiday. And by the time we get back, student fees have already sat, and our fees have already been decided for us. Hence the short time and notice and so forth. So just before we begin, I think it's important to realize that I'm in the same position as you. I would never come here for any other ulterior motives. I want, just like you, cheaper, better quality education. And I'm not working for the faculty, I'm not working for the university. This is why there's no management here. There's just us, and it's just us discussing fees. So us, together, we can formalize a unified approach towards student fees on this campus, and particularly MBChB fees. And I don't need to do this. I said to my council last night, I think there's quite a bit of risk that I take by being here, by presenting this to you, because I could just end my term. But after subsequent meetings with many entities, with students, with faculty, with university management, I've really come to grasp the concepts of student fees. And with that knowledge, I find my responsibility to then present something that's more advantageous for students to come. So yeah, I really hope that many of you come without prejudice. I really don't want any of you guys to see me as this person who's telling you guys what's going to happen. I think this should be an equal way discussion. You guys give me suggestions and I'll take it forth like that. And I think we also have the duty to fully analyze what we have in front of us. I think I thought of an analogy today. If someone gives you a Ferrari and you say you don't want the Ferrari because you can't drive one, that's a waste of a Ferrari. You learn to drive a Ferrari. And that's the same concept as this. The knowledge is there, we need to accept it, no matter how difficult it is, to understand it and then actually do something with it. So it's going to take a little bit of a degree of understanding of economics, and I will try and make it as simple as possible because I know how long it took me to understand it, and in an hour I doubt I'll be able to pass the information on properly, but I really hope that we can get to a common understanding about things. So I'm first going to just chat about the model fees, how fees work on our campus currently, then the model for bursaries, which is the main reason I started this, because I wanted to see how can we change student fees to ensure that we increase the efficiency of our bursaries. Then I'll talk about NSFAS, which is the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, categories of students, how they classify students, then some economics around academia, which is essential when you look to how you should structure fees. I will give you a proposal, and then I'll give you the ability to vote and ask for some questions. So our current model is this here. You can see this is MBChB 1, MBChB 2. You can see this massive discrepancy. It goes up and down, and then there's this mammoth of a year, and that is really a problem for everybody. Whether you're going to fifth year or you've come from fifth year, it's just a problem. So the system works like this. It's based on credits, and credits is an ancient way of, and they still use it, but I don't think we've updated our academic prioritization of different years. I mean, the blocks change, not really the credits associated with them. So we base our student fees on this 1 credit equals this much rand. I mean, you can go work it out. You just divide the amount of credits per module for how much it costs. And it's expensive. And we'll see why you run into so many problems. And then the fees are based on the expenses of the university. So you take the fees equals the expenses minus other funding models. So the fees we pay and is made up minus the funding models. Some of the funding models here are some investments and donations towards the university. I don't know if you saw there was a 50 million rand donation recently for a new building. So there's that type of thing that comes into play. There's the third and fourth income streams, which are mostly funding models for research, which is kind of, we can't really access it because it has to go to research. Then governmental funding, that's a really important one, and that's something we should try to target. How should we, as students, effectively use government funding, and then also try to find ways to make sure that it's increased. We saw end of 2015, now 2016, government compensation increasing, and hopefully it will continue increasing. And then when we look at this, we need to ensure that that we shouldn't become victims of inflation. We should use inflation to our advantage. So there's this massive discrepancy in the years. I think that you will see that if you're an MBChB 5 student, for instance, you're here for 3 months, and you've actually used so little resources of the university, yet your fees are so much more simply based on a model of financing for fees that is so outdated, and clearly some massive problems exist in it. So it's unequal, inconsistent, and yeah, I think if you look at here, MBChB 1 versus MBChB 2, MBChB 2, you're looking at almost no holidays, no life, no light. It's just a bottomless pit. And then there's MBChB 1, which you get, I don't know if they still study, I don't know where they are anymore. They just never seem to be here anymore. So you get a lot more holiday, you use a lot less of the university's resources. Yet you're looking at a model now where this is higher than MBChB 2. That should show you that there's something massively wrong in this. And I think that's how we should target it. So I think I will propose it now. It's to just remove the credit-based system. And that's the biggest thing. And obviously before I go forward, I need input from people. Do they like this idea of removing the credit-based system, or do they want to continue using it? And then how will fees get billed? I can't really say it to you now. But as I proposed, I think this credit-based system is outdated and horrible and really is not representative of what we work with, what we work for. And it also puts us in difficult situations. So that's my first proposition, it's removing credit-based fees. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about bursaries. Before we get into bursaries, you must just find the categories of students. So you will get category 1 students. These are students who are able to finance their own studies. They do not need loans, they do not need bursaries. Then category 2 students, these are students who can partially finance their studies, but need the assistance of small loans, but kind of get through, kind of don't. So it's a smaller proportion on campus. Category 3 students, these are students that cannot fund they can't fund their studies themselves, so therefore they need to take loans out, and this creates a massive debt cycle within this group as well. So this is quite famously known at the moment as the missing middle. That's where a lot of universities are trying to focus their funding to try assist these students. And then there's the category 4 students of why I actually created this model. It's because these are the students who cannot fund their studies, but and they fail to take out any loans. So, and these students are able to pass the means test, while missing middle students are not able to pass the means test. So these students are generally covered by bursary. So I think you should keep in count these different categories as we go on. You will see it applied at different areas. So how our bursary systems work, there's a whole bunch of different ways it comes in through foundations and stuff, but these are the broad categories. This is the NSFAS, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, academic bursaries, company bursaries, which companies donate, and that also includes your foundation bursaries, and then your bursary loans, which are loans that are considered bursaries just because they're 0% or they're prime minus whatever. So NSFAS, after subsequent and long and hard meetings, I've discovered that NSFAS is primarily only catered for year 1 to 4. And that's where our problem comes in. And it's based on a mean score, as you guys know. So I think the way it is allocated, somewhat fair, but the fact that it caters only for undergraduates of 4 years is where the problem comes into us specifically. So you can see here, I made a little representation here. NSFAS covers mainly this, and that's where the majority of our bursaries in our first 4 years come from. And sometimes you directly apply to NSFAS, sometimes you through the university who gets money from NSFAS. But at the end of the day, it's from year 1 to 4. And you can see the problem already. Why is it that we've got our most expensive year outside the NSFAS bracket? And that's what we should target. NSFAS is directly government. That's government's money towards university. So we can see it starts becoming clear where you need to target and change the values. So university bursaries, university bursaries are made up of more than 50% of other students' fees who are able to pay for it. And this is the highest proportion in South Africa. as much beef as we can give this university, it did ensure the best registration period in South Africa. No student was not able to register because of finances, only because of academics. And I think that's what we need to protect. We need to ensure that next year when we apply again, there's protection for these students. And so this whole proposition goes about, those are the students we need to protect. And then your NSFAS, I've just touched on it, how as your cheapest years are from year 1 to 4, why is it that year 5 and 6 are so expensive? And this is because of the credit-based system. So once we remove that, then we can start trying to level things out. And I think it's also important, if we do reduce level 5, MBChB 5 and 6 fees, you're able to cover more of this missing middle, which is category 3 students who also require a large amount of financial assistance. And that's because year 5 and 6, most bursaries convert to loans, and that means massive student debt for students once they reach year 5 and 6. And once they graduate with year 6, even though you aren't aware of it now, those loans take you for the rest of your life. So we need to also reduce year 5 and 6's fees to reduce these loans. So you can really start seeing that that because NSFAS covers year 1 to 4, they will be largely unaffected by fee changes in those years. I know this doesn't always make sense and stuff, but I will explain a little bit later about how government funds the universities and such. But the big point of this is we should not continue taking the burden for government's lack of funding through to the university. I don't think we should take responsibility for it. I mean, we all try to push towards free education. This is the first step. This is the first step by telling them that they need to step up. So it's just here's another concept about the bursaries, is that an increase in fees equals an increase in bursaries, which is fair. That's obviously fair, but also no fees equal no increase in bursaries. And then you need to understand how the other forms of inflation will creep up on your food, this, that, and your bursary just doesn't cover that. So that's another thing we have to be very aware of. And then, yeah, I can go here. I think what's most important for these bursaries is that we ensure category 4 students are, and these are the students that are not able to pay for their fees. They are covered, and NSFAS does cover this. I've gone through quite a few meetings where I've sat down with people and said, if this type of thing had to happen, will it affect our students coming from category 4 households? And the commitment was no, this does not affect them, because increased numbers, increased fees in those years means just increased government compensation. So, and this really does allow for more reserve funding for MBChB 5 and 6. And we will be able to continue covering them, and it just makes that your year 5 and 6 cheaper. So I say that missing middle students are incredibly important as well, and also your category 1 and 2 students now, more than 50%, if you fall into this bracket, is going towards another student studying, and that's really great, but you want that money to be used effectively. And currently, if the way you look at it, it's being channeled into the university bursary system, which only channels to year 5 and 6. So that means that your money is, instead of being channeled towards cheaper years, it's being channeled towards the most expensive years. So you can see where that discrepancy lies. So even our category 1 and 2 students will benefit greatly from this, because their money is being used to fund a more sustainable model. So yeah, I've said that bursaries convert to loans, and that's really massive, and it also happens to a lot of people using NSFAS. I think that you convert instantly to a loan, and if you're looking at 60 to 70,000 Rand a year, and that doesn't include your res accommodation, we're looking at something quite major, and it's something that we have to be very aware of. And then there's the most important concept out of this entire talk, and that is the idea of academic inflation. So now academic inflation and normal inflation, your CPI, or what you pay for your food and fuel and stuff like that is based on an entirely different set of inflation indexes. Now this inflation index is internationally known as something that really creeps up on people. And you can see the US, they have a real problem with it, but that's because they don't have enough government compensation. And the same happened to us. When people ask, why is it that fees increase so much every single year? It's because academic inflation comes up. And if for instance, South Africa doesn't adjust with that academic inflation. It just means that the universities will go above what normal inflation is. So I hope that concept makes a little bit of sense, that academic inflation is just horrible and so much more. And I tried to do some research why it's so much more. It's mostly got to do with international intellectual properties. If you want to publish in journals, if you want to be an internationalized university, this is what the cost comes at. We've also, our economy really sucks at the moment, and that's just going to increase our academic inflation well above normal inflation because your imports are just so much more. I think it's also that the university wants to increase transformation, and I think this is one of the biggest ones. And universities all through the South Africa have to increase transformation, and with that comes the need to fund these models. And I think that although we can see academic inflation as being bad, we can also see it as being something pretty great, that it's actually working towards increasing the amount of black students, and particularly at Stellenbosch. And then there's a whole bunch of other small things like textbooks, lecturer attraction from around the world. You know, you've got to build an internationalized university. And then also your outward responsibilities. There's now more of a requirement from government so that not only does Stellenbosch transform within itself, but transforms other communities, uplifting other. So it's the transformation in and out concept. And then I think, before we look at the fees now, I think it's important to know that academia inflation will always increase, and it will always, unfortunately, be above gross national inflation. That means, simply put, that if you're a first year in 2000, it would be so much cheaper to study than if you were in a first year in 2016. Beside just normal inflation, your parents' salary might increase by 5%. But academic inflation will increase by 10%, and that's the terrible cycle that we have to beat, and that's one of the target places. So that academic inflation really is a villain. So here's just a little indication of, you can see the bars over here are the education percentages, the inflation, and you can see that the line over here is just normal consumer price index on foods, for instance, and that usually equates to sometimes even more than salary increases. So you can see there's some form of correlation here. You're sitting on 10.5 and the year is on 8.5%. So as soon as gross national inflation dips, your academic inflation dips as well. And that's great for us. That means our fees don't have to be such a problem. But as you can imagine, they haven't done the census yet, but where our inflation sits is like somewhere up here. So our inflation is just going to become more and more of a problem with a weaker rand. And I know that we don't really want to mix ourselves up into economics, but that's just the reality. Our rand determines how much our inflation goes up by. So we do need to take ownership of this. We have to be cognizant of it, and we need to try and apply ourselves and our faculty in a way that we can do better. So here's just education by province and by university, how much it increases by, and obviously, when you have provinces that were poorer in the past, they need to compensate more. Hence, their economic inflation can be so much higher than ours, who sits on with Gauteng, probably where the big universities are, they sit on gross national inflation. So the normal inflation rates at the moment, this was taken in 2015, is probably higher, but you're looking at 7 to 8% in academic inflation, between 10 and 12%. Which is significant. I mean, that's like your bread increasing, substantially every single year, and it feels like you can do nothing about it. And that's why students get so frustrated. So this is the current system that's used, and this is called credit-based economics, and it is highly outdated. I don't think any university uses credit-based fee structures anymore, and I don't think any other courses do other than MBChB. So that's our first starting point. You can see I've taken this is what 2015 fees are, and 2016 obviously, but this was a model I used last year, so these fees are meant to be exactly the same. But we can see that there's massive alteration, and then there's this one that is really the problem. So if we take the sum of a student starting in 2015 as a first year and continue to add it until the year of 2020, you're looking at a total of 378,000 Rand. And then if you look at a student who starts in 2021, he starts with 83,000 Rand versus that 47,000 Rand. You can see already it's double, and that is the horrible thing about academic inflation. And so then you're looking at each year increases, and by 2026, he's paying in his 6th year on this model 136,000 Rand for the year. So that is the reality we have to look at, and I think we need to address it before we get to that. So when you're looking at the flattening model, which was proposed last year, you're looking at this being equal. And then if you look at the sum of the students starting in first year in 2015 and ending in 2020, you're looking at a total of 375, and a student starting in 2021 and ending in 2026 as a total of 665. So I think these values are terrible. I don't think you should ever propose these to students. This is what it might look like, because we don't know, but we need to try solve now. So when we look at the comparison between the two, we can see that if you use the credit-based system, in total, you're looking at a loss versus the fee flattening system. And so this first one is over here, a measure of a student who started in 2015 into 2020, and this is the one who started in 2021. And the difference between these two values is 2,544. You can see it's a perpetually increases over time, and the difference by the 10-year mark would be 4,506 Rand. It isn't that much, but when you start adding all the different things like NSFAS covering models and things, it can mean that these things, more students would be able to apply for these points here. So yeah, even if without considering the implications of bursaries, and that's really why this thing's here, we're saving because of inflation. Can you believe it? If we place the expensive years, these years here, and we place it more into other years. So you're saving eventually, there's no way about that. And then you get the added factors of bursaries being able to cover first to fourth years. So there's massive savings, and there's this advantage which every other course in the university and other universities apply, yet we for some reason don't apply it. So you can see that massive problem there. So I really don't know what the future of fees are. I mean, now we need to ask ourselves, what about fees for next year? Are they going to increase or they're not going to increase? But even if they don't increase, the model still applies. You will still not have any difference you will still have some form of profit saving, because guess what? If it doesn't increase next year, there will be at some point some form of increase, and with that there will be some inflation that affects it. So you're looking at not just us who sits here right now, but you're looking at hundreds of thousands of students that still need to come through medicine, and it's up to us to change that they don't get affected so severely by fifth-year inflation problems. So yeah, just before I go on, it does sound a little bit too good to be true. I mean, yeah, I'm just spewing out models of that. This works, this works, this works. But it's because internationally, this is what most people are going for. Credit-based systems, the last time anyone used it was a long time ago in an unknown university. So yeah, so that's the gist of it. So who are the winners out of all of this? So if you're at MBChB 1, 2, 3, 4, who is going to benefit, who's going to not benefit? Every student until fifth year will benefit. That's it. Students in year 6 won't ever see any changes, and the people that won't benefit is year 5, and that's why I am not in accordance with the previous model, fee flattening one. Because if you look here, if you're in 2015, let's say you're in 2015, these are just because fees haven't been adjusted for that. But if you're in 2015 and you pay 60,000 Rand a year and you go to MBChB 6 and it would cost 47,000 Rand, you're still getting an increase on that one, plus the fact that you have to pay for MBChB 5 such an expensive fee. So that's why the proposed model used by the faculty did not take into consideration that at all. That fifth years would have been so detrimentally affected by the fact that they have to now pay for an increase to pay for other people to have decreases. So there was that massive thing. So I think that's something that we have to also address, that there's a 1.6% increase for them next year, and there are the people there. But everyone from year 1 to year 4 currently will benefit greatly from an adjustment to the fees. Year 5, as I said, we need to find a solution for that, and year 6 carry on, and their earning salaries must be nice. So what solution can we do to this? I think it's important that when 5th years leave, they leave here as if they started, as they know what was going to come next year. I think it would be too difficult now to start playing around with the other year's fees. So, which leads me to my final proposal, and this is the final proposal. This is proposition number 2. So here is, let's say, 2015. Okay, this is all just, I'm using these values from last year, they're the same now. Just pretend this is 2016, this is 2017, this is 2018. But here we can see that most of these students will jump, and it will be quite a small jump. Obviously, the small jumps together won't significantly affect students as much as a jump from 42,000 Rand to 60,000 Rand. You see, so we need to somehow buffer that as well, and that this model does as well. But at the same time, your MBChB 6 students who are going to MBChB 6 students next year, or MBChB 6 next year, they should not feel any changes to this. They shouldn't be negatively affected because you change fee structures because of them. So they need to, so the people that will have to compensate slightly, but not that badly, would be your MBChB 5 students who would not be able to reach this lovely level over here, but they will have to stick on something just smaller. So eventually, MBChB students that are going to MBChB 5 next year will be compensating that small little change that MBChB 6 would have felt, that 1.6% of MBChB 6. So that way we're buffering them both. And so I think just to not make everyone too scared of this idea, let's just use any example, except for MBChB 5, as I said, that will remain the same. Let's use current 3rd years, because if you have looked at this graph before, you as a 3rd year would be going into something that would have been quite nice. Or no, MBChB 3. MBChB 3 students would be going into something quite nice. Their fees would be deducted. And then you think to yourself, oh man, are you just going to increase fees for me? That's unfair. And it really isn't. So if you take the sum of MBChB 3, the current 3rd years from the MBChB 3 to the MBChB 5, they're still saving on excess almost 4,000 Rand. So you can do this to any other course as well. If you add it up, they will still be saving money. And the only people that will, as I've said, is MBChB 5, which we try flatten. So I want you to interpret it like this. I think that we need to increase governmental funding to years 4 and 5, and how we do that is because we adjust towards our earlier years rather than our final years. We beat this academic inflation. So with any investment or any debt, you don't try let compound interest get the better of you. You try solve it early on, and that's the best strategy towards that. And I think that's also really important to understand that poor students suffer the most from inflation. So even though category 1 and 2, they will still kind of be fine. It's the category 4 students that will be most affected by it, and mostly students that are trying to get to come to our university, the black students. And so this type of thing will really make it a more attractive place for them. And I want them to, once they get here, feel comfortable in this place and that they can be supported. So, and that we do by increased governmental funding. Then it will also be reducing the loans for MBChB 5 to 6 students, as I've said, and most of these also a lot of these get to category 3 by that point. And then also, first years in category 3 and 4 will be mostly unaffected. And I know this sounds strange, but when I check the Department of Health budget, when I see the Department of Higher Education budget, those are the increase for medical students because the country just needs more medical staff, and hence that increases. So no matter what we really do to our funding, the Department of Health and Department of Higher Education have a self-commitment that they need to produce more doctors. So that means from feeding to MBChB 1 will happen regardless of what we do anyway. And I can tell you that they will never drop the amount of black students coming into this university again. That's unacceptable. It's not even a question. It's now the mandate of the university to increase that number. So you will never look at something where black students will not be allowed to come to the university. Their numbers will only increase. And hence, how will they increase? By government compensation. And I think it's also, we need to also decrease the burden on our fee-paying students, and particularly to our students in loans. And then finally, I really do think that at the end of the day, why it sounds so good is because the previous one was just so bad. When I looked at it and I looked at it again, the economics of it was just horrible. It just does not make sense that you would put something so expensive right at the end from when you started. So yeah, that's my thing. So I will explain one more time the proposition. That in 2017, I should change it. 2017, you have kind of smooth, and then MBChB 5 doesn't decrease as much as until this value, and then MBChB 6, students going to MBChB 6 are unaffected by these fee changes. They leave as if they were going to receive those same fees anyway. So it's as if they never get affected by the system. So that's proposition number 2. So proposition number 1 will be to remove credit-based fees, and proposition number 2, apply the transition fees and fees that are equal. Now, I think at 6:30, yes, so it's already happened, but at 6:30 on the Facebook page is going to be a link that's come up where you are able to vote for whether you would like this or not. And you're also able to try somehow memorize this number. But up until that point, I'm pretty much done. No, never. So yeah, we can start with a quick round of questions. If anyone would like to ask anything, I know it was quite a mouthful all at once, but yeah. Okay, I'll take Chairperson and Justin.
Yeah, sorry guys. Just to maybe strengthen on the credit-based system that Nick mentioned. If you think about your elective for the medical students, you have 2 electives, and I know it's based on the credit-based system. So you pay per elective about 8,000 Rand to the university. So for your 2 electives, that's 16,000 Rand. So if you think about it, a moderately sized class, about 250 students, that means you pay 4 million Rand to the university that basically is not used for anything else, because you pay for your own elective, you pay for your own transport, you have to organize your own transport. There's not really any admin fees or things involved in your elective. So I think with the credit-based system in 5th year, I think there is a problem. There's a major problem with that.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and that comes from a system of the university seeing what's the total costs, then dividing it among the credits between the years, and that's where the major problem lies. Is that now 5th years who are hardly here just have to pay more. Okay, we've got Union and Justin.
Yes, thank you. I just want to ask around how the university calculate the total expenses. Is that structure set out somewhere in terms of these are the expenses, this is what our elective actually costs in terms of admin fees, like they're saying that. This is what it costs to do this module, this is what we pay, that type of thing. Because if you have that, then you can also look at accurately looking at modules. Is this actually the fees that we are paying actually for our education, for what is it? So is there something like that? And then also another question on the side is, in terms of the flattening, it still looks to me like a flattening of fees, but then you show that inflation will still be a problem. How do you think we can tackle inflation, like academic inflation? I don't think we can really specifically, but what do you think?
Okay, so to your first question about the expenses of the university, now I've been accused of knowing the expenses of the university. I wish I knew those things. But I think the expenses of the university, they've given us this strange model where I can remember last year they gave us this per rand type thing. It was the worst idea in the world. But yeah, so that's apparently where our expenses lie. I think the end goal of all of this, and I wrote it over here in my prognosis of our problem, would be that we should rather look at it per material. Like if you are opening that gate, how much electricity was used for that gate, you pay for that electricity, you know? And we divide those costs like that. That is the end goal. But currently, we need to come to something that's at least where we can start talking about that. Currently, the model we have, we can't even talk about anything. We're so far backwards in our fee model. So that's why I said in about 2 years, not even 6 years like I said on the slide, but in 2 years, you can start re-looking at this. But until that point, we need to reach that middle ground of equal fees, and then we can start subdividing like that. But currently, that's the problem. And then the second question was?
Regarding the academic inflation, is there ways to...
So how other universities around the world get to beat their academic inflation is by the government's compensation increases with the academic inflation. So I'll show you a quick graph, but on that thing with the census here, normally a government would compensate for this, right? So they would take it, for 2009, our education CPI was 10.5%, hence our increase to universities will be 10.5%. That's where it comes from. That's how other universities are able to stop them. And I wish I had a solution to perhaps trying to find a way to do that. But I really do think that, and it's quite a crazy idea, but you get your first few years to have the highest fees, and then your last years to have the lowest fees. That's how you're going to beat inflation. That's how you beat any form of loan or investment even. You invest early, and then also I wrote a prognosis here. I just think it's ridiculous that 6 years even pay fees, since they don't really use university property. But as I said, that's something that can be done in 2 years' time. Where we've actually come to something more equal. Okay, and then Justin.
I had 2 questions. The one actually answered in your prognosis. Thank you for that. The second one was what proportion of the year 1 to 4 is actually covered by NSFAS? Like I'm sure it's not the bottomless pit, it's all the first 4 years feed in there. If there is some level where NSFAS actually like calls it and says okay, we're done, you've used your 45,000 for example, and thereafter you need to pay for yourself.
I think that's one of the privileges of being in medicine, is that it's something that they can't really reduce the numbers in. Like it's a commitment by the government. So that's why I say that they will just have to cough up more money for it. And I've spoken to people both working from this plus and the university bursary system, and that's where it comes from. So I can't tell you what proportion of it is, but students that are covered by recruitment bursaries and stuff, that comes from this plus funding. And that's where, well, some of it comes from this plus funding. So if we're able to increase those numbers, I can't see it changing too much, because the proportion from this plus will increase as well. It has to increase. They don't really have a choice. It's the privilege we're sitting with at the moment, and we can kind of do it because we've got interdepartmental funding through the government, and that's where it lies. I don't think it would be able to buy anywhere else. So I have okay. Second round of questions. Okay.
Yeah, basically the credit-based system determines how much we pay. So now, if we want to take away this credit-based system, what will determine how much we will pay? If my question makes sense. And then because in 40/50, you'll still be technically paying for an elective that you use no resources on the university. So how are we going to try and fix that situation?
Yeah, I think, thank you very much for the question. It's a good one, because it's something I've been thinking of as well, because now we're solving one problem and yet another problem is still coming up anyway. I think it's the fact that we come to a middle ground. I haven't been able to think of a model yet where we can do that, and I don't think it's always our responsibility to think of that model. I certainly don't. I have to study medicine like everyone else does. So I think the major problem is that we're sitting in a place, and institutions like Stellenbosch, like a lot of Stellenbosch in particular, they can't really cover for what expenses are for what. Like, so I think one of the major problems for medicine is that so much of our compensation goes towards Stellenbosch main campus. And that's why every form of funding this year that we've come towards, I've seen that, like, for instance, we pay for an academic affairs council, and then they want us to pay for their academic affairs council. And then I think to myself, how on earth does that work? We're not. So there's that draw towards paying for other things that are not what we have to pay for. So that's the first thing I think we have to stop. And then secondly, like you said, we need to find a model to actually cost what we do. And effectively cost what we're doing. I don't think the universities can keep running like private McDonald's or whatever, where they don't tell you the price of things, they just give you the burger and tell you that's how expensive it is. It's a public entity, and because of that, I think we deserve to know what the prices are. I'm sorry if I'm not able to answer your question properly. Yeah.
I have 2 questions. First one might be a silly one, sorry if I missed when you said, but about the leveling of the fees. You said if that does happen, it will be about, I think, 3, 4, 5 grand that you save over the course of the 6 years. How is that possible? Because surely overall it's still the same lump sum money that you pay. Why, what happened to that 4 grand?
So yeah, you're right, it's still the same lump sum, but it's the inflation applied to it. And that's the reality of what I was saying, that the academic inflation is really the villain in all of this. Otherwise, I suppose we could leave it as it is, but still. And that comes to the second concept of bursaries equal fees. So if the fees remain the same, but everything else becomes so much more expensive, the bursary compensation for students who rely on bursaries for food and stuff will suffer, because that is an increasing number.
Just in terms of students on
Yeah.
loans and the interest of the loans, if you look at redistributing the money into the first year, I think it's maybe just something to look at, looking at the interest building up from your first year rather than the interest building up from your 5th year, being able to pay it off a lot sooner. You might just want to see in terms of how many students are on loans and how it will affect ultimately how those two.
I think when I created this funding model, I thought about the eventual thing that we should start looking at compensating more for students with loans rather than trying to solve the same old problem that we've been doing, because this missing middle, and that's exactly what you're talking about, students affected by loans, they will continue to be affected by loans unless we find another strategy. So yes, if you start in first year and you have that loan, I can't see it, because I think that, remember those loans are based on fixed interest based on the CPI index, which is the national inflation. So that will increase fine, but when you get to 5th year, that 5th year will be much more than any loans interest would have been anyway. So I think that those kind of cancel each other out. If not, the 5th year with all that bulk extra onto it would have been so much more expensive anyway. I hope that answers your question, John. But I do think still, even if you start in first year and you have a little bit more expensive loans, rather than it increasing with the academic inflation right at the end. Because at the end of the day, our students are kind of quite a good investment. Yes, sorry for your question.
Just 2 questions. I think the first one, I think I might be misunderstanding that you said that with students who can't afford to pay in the first 4 years, then MSFAS would cover them. Except MSFAS, only 50% of it gets converted to a bursary if you pass all your credits. So the other 50% you kind of still have to pay back. So it's not like it's financial sort of alleviation. It doesn't get rid of it completely, because they still have the burden of the other 50%, which is well over 100 grand. And then secondly, this idea, well, with everything that it seems, it might be a good idea when you propose it, but currently the university, all the university businesses, as much as we like to fool ourselves, they actually don't care about us. So how can we incentivize this to university to actually get them to buy into it? Because they can just say, wow, this is a really good idea, and they just do nothing about it, because they're benefiting from what they have to say 4 million rand from Sri Lanka. So what incentive do they have to not do that?
So your first question was about the bursary at the MSFAS, and then the second part was about the how I'm going to get the university to apply this. So with MSFAS, it's the same as the loan concept which I just explained now. No matter what level of loan inflation it is, by the time you get to 5th year, it's going to be so much higher anyway. And I think also, as soon as you alleviate some of the burden for the first 4 years, it allows the university to channel more of its year 5 and 6 compensation at 50% from other students into further bursaries. Because a lot of students, even though they get NSFAS and the 50% bursary, 50% loan, they ask additional income because they will have to pay for some residence fees that aren't included in NSFAS, or they'll have to pay for groceries, for instance. So there's those factors that also need to come into account when you try and accommodate students that can't pay for it. So with Dominic's question, I still think that that just because of the nature of inflation, by the time you get to 5th year, you want to pay it off, no matter if you have a loan or you don't have a loan. You understand? And then my second question would be, or the second question would be, I can't promise you 100% that'll work, but I'm pretty sure it'll work. I've looked at their economic models and I've chatted to them way before this all even started happening, just to get because I wouldn't invite everyone here just for fun and then I send a nice proposal to them. It just doesn't work. I'll never ever do that to you guys. So I'm pretty sure that if I do have to propose it to the people that I've spoken to, not exactly the head of student fees, but the people beneath them working on the economic models of it, and then we've also got Eugene on student fees as well, that we're able to get something that will work. Because at the end of the day, if you look at this over here, this is what, they just need this. They don't really care how they get to that. They don't really care what's in here to get to that. But what we care about is where are we placing these funds and how are we going to make it more acceptable. So I think it won't be a problem for them anyway, because this will remain largely the same. Yeah.
Sorry, my other question was about the 4 million rand for the medical. So I completely agree that if that is the case, that 4 million rand is going to university and nothing is happening with that money, it's completely ridiculous. And I say if because I'm potentially playing devil's advocate, a question that you probably won't be able to answer, but maybe you can get it answered, is if we didn't pay any money for elective, which like we shouldn't because we pay for ourselves, would the expenses for all of our other courses not go up? Like, is that 4 million rand not for everything else? And obviously I kind of hope it isn't, because I hope that we don't have to pay 4 million rand, but if it is, then that makes sense, and then it is fair, I guess, that we're paying money.
Yeah, you see, and that's why I'm so against your fifth years paying so much money on it, because they will obviously never get to see how that has worked. So let's say you take your 4 million and whether you place it in the university or not, that shouldn't be calculating it in that, and that's why the credit-based system. I think they don't really have any interest in where the money comes from. It just must come from somewhere, and that's what I'm trying to solve here. So that 4 million, yes, it does pay for other things, and so the other ones would have to increase. But I think I really do believe in what you pay for is what you should be getting. And if you're in 5th year and you're not really getting those services, then you should really not be paying that much. And if the other years are too expensive, then we should also try to solve that. But I just don't think that it would be very fair.
That's completely fair, but then if that's true, that money is actually being used for our good and for cardio and for rest.
No, I think it is used to compensate other models.
But then, why is this ongoing fight? But we're paying for elective and we're not actually we're not doing these reports, because you say that it's not fair that we're paying more for the other courses, but I mean more for elective and less for the other courses, but overall it would be fair if we pay the same amount of money, just in a different place.
You want to answer that?
Girl wrong, if you think about it. Because like you said, that they look at all that things, they look at all their expenses, calculate that, minus the additional funds that they get, they see this, and they divide that across all the credits, and pay a certain amount per credit. And then because credits are not actually for funds, credits are for say, when you work with units on main campus, credits come in, because they count how important is this module for your course, will determine how many credits it is. So credits doesn't really correlate with the funds needed for that module, which means that elective, even though they say, there is possible elective, it would not be that 4 million rand elective, the elective department gets. They don't get that money, they get what they need. That 4 million is spent otherwise.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
So that's initially a question and the issue she has with that. But now we have to remember that now students pay for that elective thing on that credit-based system. But on top of fifth year investing, they have to also pay for to go on their elective, actually. So which is an additional burden, even though that money is not specifically billed correctly. So I think that's the issue.
No, and also that they won't receive compensation for it. So let's say they also want to go on a nice bursary, but the other money is going to, they also want to go on a nice elective, but they can't afford it because their elective money is going towards university. So that's another strategy. I don't know, I'm sorry, I don't know if I answered your question. I don't think I'm able to answer your question. But it's hugely unfair, and I still do believe in the cost for what you get system. I think that's still optional. Okay.
I just think a lot of students think that money goes nowhere, so that's just what my understanding.
Yeah, I also think that though. But let's just try and get to a point where we can at least start talking about things rather than what this old system we have got. Chris, anyone else like to ask a question of last round? Any more? Okay, cool, Chris.
Just two things. First, a question about your proposal, or the second half of your proposal, with regards to the flattening of fees. Is that for me to pay 48 grand per year from first year to sixth year, or is that for me to pay the same as all the other years every year? Am I going to go up with interest, or recalculating interest beforehand and assuming interest and then kind of leveling it up?
Yeah, I think that it would be impossible for me to be able to predict what interest would be. So I just use the base model for interest, what interest would be, and that's at its lowest point. I think I used 8.4, whatever, on the scale that the national government provided, whatever. Yeah. So yeah, I used an average of this to do the calculations of the increases in years, and I just used it as a flat model. It might have increased whatever, but the trends show that it would lie between 8.5 and 10, whatever. So I used the lowest model anyway. So to give you the minimum amount of money that it would increase by. So it would increase, as I said, it would increase like 48. Yeah, got the values here. But it would increase, like this.
Because I remember last year we were discussing around the time fees was for the end of the year. We could get into a flat rate, so I could preempt, I could predict what I was going to pay for the years to come. So another model that we could propose is if you assume you take the last 10 years, you take the average, and then you take a 9.7 average increase, add that on, shift the entire thing, so you got 48,722, shift that up by 9.8%.
And you just
split it, but when you split it, you actually raise the first year and lower the sixth year, so you get a downwards curve, which means that we gain on the compound interest that we would be paying. So you actually pay more at the beginning and less.
I like that idea a lot, and I thought of it as well, but the only problem is that I don't know what's going to necessarily happen with the interest on our academics, because this year the government still hasn't posted at what they're going to increase or what they're going to compensate the academic inflation by. So either they can do it by the full amount this year and then not at all again, and then we've proposed this scheme and then it goes through, and then some poor person has to 2 to 3 years later has to now pay this hugely expanded value because of that model. But I still think that would probably be the best. I mean, we do need to start looking at our fees not as much as this thing that we have to kind of do aside at the beginning of the year. It is an investment we're throwing ourselves into, and how do we manage this investment as well as we can? And I think as soon as we remove the credit basis, we can start looking in that direction. Okay, and then then I go. Okay.
This is what regards to the last question. Because I remember last year when Mr. Moton, yes, he was trying to explain the same thing because we asked the same question. Where does Typerbit's money go? Literally, where does Typerbit find, like if everyone pays, where does it go? His honest answer was it goes to Stellenbosch. So basically he doesn't know how much Typerbit makes in terms of the money that we all pay for, because everything is drafted by Stellenbosch University. It's like we're a franchise of Stellenbosch University sort of business. They expect a certain amount of money. So yeah, to be honest, for all we know, the 4 million actually does nothing. But then it will come back to you, because he can't answer those questions. I don't know who actually can, because he's supposed to be the economic person here on Typerbit. who's supposed to tell us how much or like where does the money need to go. So now to add on what Siti just said, I want to know, is the university willing to take a cut in terms of their profit from this franchise? Because we're not asking for just like leveling everything, because we want money that is not being used to be cut off. Like we want revenue to be cut off. Is the university willing to take that cut? That's the question that we should also be asking. Or are they going to come with another manna language bullshitting excuse that, oh yeah, look, it levels up with other stuff? Because that's what happened last year when we spoke to Mr. Motori. But now we're getting the credit system up. If it goes up, are they willing to take the cut? Because that's another problem. Because they're going to come with that 1 rand situation, needs to be 1 rand and whatever. But are they willing to take 75 cents instead? So that's what I'm, yeah.
Yeah, so I agree, and that's what I said as well initially, that this decentralization of Tiger Burger means that we spend 100% there, and then we get 40% back, or whatever. And then they say, the other 60% is in different services, but I struggle to see how that happens. And I will ask, obviously, but I think that requires more from just, I can't do it myself, that's the type of thing that requires on every level to be asked, to be persistently asked, not just when the end of the year comes, when the fees are released. That needs to be persistently requested, and I did in the beginning of the year, and he gave me the same 1 rand model. So I know that Janine does also work on student fees, or she's going to sit in the student fees committee. If she gets any more feedback on that, we can try to look at that, but I just think that it would require, and this is why it's such a risk to stand here. It's because I'm going to, as if I knew the answers to a lot of these questions. I just want to propose something that we can start talking to these people with. Because currently, the system that we rely on doesn't even, we're like in 1920s with this model we're using at the moment. Plus, you says YMIS, your credit is based on YMIS. We don't even work on YMIS on this campus. So it's like you're so far removed from what we should actually be doing. So I will definitely propose the idea of removing the credit system, but it is still up to everybody else. I will never do anything that the campus doesn't want. So it is up to everyone else about the flattening, the smoothing. I mean, I'll just give you an opportunity where I can explain the economics behind it. If you don't want the smoothing, then that's fine. But the smoothing comes with removing the credit system. Up until this point, there's no other way you can do it. Until we branch away from Stellenbosch University. So, yeah. And then, Adrian, last question.
I just want to say, okay, I know that you just obviously here just to present a idea to us, fantastic idea, great idea, I'm on board with it. Everybody's talking about the sovereignty of Tigerberg. We all want Tigerberg to be this like sovereign state. Now, I'm not going to be, I know maybe I might ask a question once again that you might not be able to answer, but it might be something that you can bring up and discuss with people who might be able to answer you. And that is, maybe we're paying stuff here for main campus, but is main campus stuff maybe sometimes compensating here? Is it? Are we sure about that?
Yeah, so I have spoken to management about this on the directors management team when we discussed a thing that was similar on the broad scale, I think just a bit smaller. And it was about transport proof, particularly, and they said, yeah, actually we're paying more, we give more to Tigerberg than we get back on Tigerberg. But yeah, that's just vehicles because we drive a lot on this campus, because we're an island. I mean, what do you expect of us? But yeah, so that's just that. But there are other avenues of which we will definitely be spending money. So I'm going to allow, because this is a really important topic, I'll allow 1 or 2 more questions and then we can close off. If anyone else would like to ask. Yes?
Yeah, so it's clear that most of the questions being asked are based on what the fees are actually going for, which is obvious that you aren't in a position to answer that because you're not really getting answers from main campus or from Tigerberg campus regarding that. So my question is more in terms of it's great working towards a 2-year goal now, but how willing has the people been that you've spoken to really investigate exactly what the fees are going for? Like how willing are they to speak with main campus, to sit and have a meeting and really look at what the fees are going for and why we're paying the things that we're paying? Because I think that would just clarify so much of people's concerns. If you really have
you know, you don't want to go to Pick and Pay and just get an end bill and then not know whether it went for milk or meat or, you know, what degree you're paying for. And that's the issue.
That's the issue, yeah. Yeah, so I can tell you right now that I don't think anyone was. So the fees will increase with academic inflation, as I've said, and academic inflation is based largely on this graph here. I mean, that's what it increases every single year. So for 4 years, Stellenbosch actually compensated for it by only increasing by 6% or whatever. And then last year was the first year which they couldn't compensate for, and it was a bad year to not compensate students for. It really was a terrible decision. But more importantly, so take this model right, and that is what fees will increase by, because that's kind of what across the board at all the top universities, that's what they increase by. It's how much government compensation directly. So this year we received something like 350 million rand, or no, 800, I can't remember, 308. But that compensated, so I think it went for 90% of the shortfall for the fees must fall. So this year, until the Department of Higher Education releases their budget, the university can't tell, and so we can't tell. But just know this, that these figures here are what it's going to increase by. And that's why we need to find strategies to beat it. And see, I really wish we can get our government to continue compensating it for other first world countries, or even not even first world countries. We live in a country in Africa with the lowest ratio for higher education. I mean, there's something seriously wrong with the bigger system of things. So I think that's where most of the problem lies. But I agree. I think they should be more transparent about it. Yeah, I know it's not going to happen, but they should try anyway. Okay, thank you very much. You guys are welcome to go and vote.